Hi everybody, Good Buddy Kyo here. I'm not really used to this. Sorry for my nervousness. I'm not really sure about how to go about this. I mean, it's sort of out of the blue, but I wanted to at least put out what happened there for other Hetalia fans like myself. I guess I'll just type or whatever, just to get through this. As much of an interesting experience this was, I'd rather not remember it and continue with my derp life. Alright, so, this happened a while ago, before school started, that it went down. But I should probably go back even further to when it first started. It was when Axis Powers Hetalia was in full swing. Second season was still bounding through the fandom and giving out new glorious episodes every Monday. My older sister and I were both involved in the series, which was a rare occasion since we didn't often share interests with one another. Oh sure, I would force myself to get into whatever she was getting into so we could at least have a reason to hang out. But this was the first she came into my fandom without me working for it. It was really nice. Considering it was still unknown in our small town, it was even nicer just to have someone to relate to. She and I cosplayed it together, watched episodes together, got merchandise together, the whole kit caboodle. Though she was always able to get more stuff than I was because she actually had a job. At some point, she actually bought a bootleg DVD of Hetalia so she could watch it at any time, picture of which I provided to her thanks to my mother lending me her camera for a second before she had sold it by next week. Of course, all the episodes had just been ripped from the internet sites and that it had been dubbed. I watched one or two episodes with her, but really I was content with watching them online, so I left her to it. About 2 or 3 days ago, she got the DVD. She acted really weird, is the best way I can describe it. In a drop of a hat, she dropped the whole Hetalia series, setting aside her merchandise and selling her Hetalia cosplays, even selling some of them. When I tried to ask her about what was up, she said she didn't want to talk about it, to the point of she'd just glare at me if I mentioned it. I was extremely disappointed at losing my sister when it came to sibling bonding in the fandom. At this time, I'd figured she'd grow out of it or found something even better. That mindset especially fit in when she started to read Homestruck soon after it to have something to do. Now, here's where it gets even weirder. Now, it's been a while since then, probably like a month or so. I'm not sure why, probably a phone call from my best friend. I got the urge to watch some episodes with some classic good old Italy. Though currently the internet was being worked on by my father, since he was changing the phone providers and all that mess, so I decided to look for my Hetalia DVD that my sister had. It took me a long while, but I found it shoved in the back of the DVD cabinet. Not sure exactly why she had it shoved back there. Well, at the time, the bootleg wasn't really bad. It had fan art of everyone as chibis around the world with the little title on the top, same as the disc, just printed on with some fan art. I popped the DVD in the player in my room and decided to look through the episodes to find a really funny one. Maybe the one when Romano is first introduced. As I went through the episode choice option though, I found something really weird between episode 23 and 24. For those who don't know, it's the Liechtenstein and Switzerland episode. Very cute indeed. And the 24th has the conclusion on the Axis Island art thing. But there was another square choice like an episode, but there really wasn't a title next to it, what number it was or the episode was about. Though it wasn't that it was an untitled that caught my interest, but the screenshot of it. It was Italy smiling, looking upwards in a content daze. His eyes actually opened, mind you, with glistening eyes and what looked like sand, like perhaps he was laying in it. This blew my freaking mind, for this was something new. I craved for something new in the fandom always. Perhaps this was a hidden chapter I wasn't aware of, like a bonus episode. I bit my lip and trembled with excitement, and I knew I had this all to myself. Wait until my friends heard about this. I was going to be more knowledgeable than anyone else. Of course, when I look back, I wish that I hadn't found it. I clicked the select button on my remote to watch it. The title and animation appeared as always, the large orchestra blaring out a few seconds to show the Japanese katakana of Hetalia with the Axis power next to it. Soon after, it shifted to the view of the island that the Axis were stranded on, Japan and Germany sitting against the shade of a tree, while Italy just laid in the sand, soaking up sun that the cute dumb look on his face. Now, before I go on, I've read stories like this before about lost episodes of cartoon stories that I don't believe in until now, honestly. And I know how they went off about it being extremely bad quality. This actually wasn't too bad. Sure, it wasn't the best quality. It was still quite pixelated from being ripped off a site, then burned onto a disc, but it was okay. The sound was just a tad muffled, nothing too out of the ordinary. Of course, this just kind of made it creepier later on when it was able to be seen better. But I'll get to that in a bit. Back to the episode. While Italy was sunbathing in his jacket and shorts, the camera cut over to Germany and Japan, though both looked a tad upset, if not a bit worried, and then they just started to speak. Two things threw me off. One was there was no subtitles, so I had zero idea with what they were talking about. And two, their voices were actually those who voiced them in the series. I was extremely impressed of such raw footage. Though I was a bit miffled there were no subs. Oh well, as long as Hikori Yusamoto, Germany's voice actor, kept talking, I was happy all the way. The two seemed to be chatting about something serious, Germany clutching his stomach from time to time in pain as Japan would nod and set a hand on his stomach as well. My guess was that they had run out of steady food on the items that they were starving. That was kind of a downer start to the episode but it was only the beginning. There was probably a fun way to getting food later on. Just then Italy called out, having the two of them look back to where he was, which was now currently running towards the ocean. He waved to them, the two of them waving back unenthusiastically, before the other went back to just playing in the water and sand. I didn't notice this until then, but the only thing playing in the background of this was the ocean waves. Something not uncommon, but it certainly kept the atmosphere kind of static, especially when the focus was in the hungry and worried nations in the shade. But either way, I was too sucked up in just the beautiful new material I didn't question it. I didn't even care that I didn't know the bulk of it. I mostly cared about the action anyways. The nations were quiet for a while before Japan had seemingly asked something to Germany, looking to him in shock, almost exclaiming before being quiet, hushed by the island nation, making him whisper the line instead. Ooh, what was Japan thinking, I thought. But Japan had repeated the Japanese statement in much quieter and clearer tone, not taking his eyes off Italy in the water. For a few moments, the two of them discussed the issue, obviously talking about the Italian, though soon enough the two of them nodded in agreement. At the moment, even though it was just a few seconds, Germany had made the saddest face I'd ever seen, like he could burst out into tears at any moment, but he kept it back. Honestly, I inwardly flipped my shit at such emotion, even though it was short, though it made me wonder even more what brought it on. The scene changed to night. The three nations huddled in the forest fire for warmth, though they seemed to at least content with their jackets on. As usual, Italy was fast asleep next to it, sleeping contentedly while leaving the other two nations to their thoughts. Still on the sound of the ocean crashing against the shore was heard in the background as the two of them were silent, though soon enough the camera panned over to them, giving each other a subtle nod. In unison, the two stood up, going over to Italy and picking him up very carefully, not wanting to wake him up. At this point, I was extremely confused. What were they planning to do with him? Were they going to a new location? Quietly, they shuffled the sleeping nation over to the ocean and carefully set him face down. Japan setting his hand over his head so it was pushing against the water surface. It didn't take long until Italy began thrashing around, bubbles popping furiously onto the water next to his head, only having Japan press his head further, while Germany was looking away with his eyes closed and his lip being bitten on too hard. While this was going on, my mouth was hanging ajar. Japan and Germany were drowning Italy? Why? As I watched this insanity, I recognized the words German still, Italy, come from Japan. Sorry, Italy. What the hell? About 15 seconds later, which felt like almost forever of watching the poor nation, Italy's limbs fell with a plop in the water, the bubbles ceasing to rise anymore. The deed was done. But why? Japan and Germany picked up the waterlogged Italy and brought him to the shore, placing him next to the fire. While Germany sat aside, just staring at the fire as he contemplated what he'd just done, Japan unsheathed his sword and kneeled down next to the corpse, taking off his own jacket and setting it aside. With one more look into the blonde before backing down, Japan took a deep breath before making an incision from the base of his neck and towards his belly button, cutting it a bit more so he was able to flip the skin back, revealing the bloody organs of the once living nation. At this, I had to pause the episode, feeling quite lightheaded at this point. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, I read and looked at gory Hetalia stuff, but seeing it down in Studio Gene style and done in official voices, it was just too surreal. And while I had the TV paused, I had a good chance to look at Italy's insides. God, that sounded so weird as I typed this. And they looked so real. Not that they were hyper-canned, but as if the artist had started at the inside of anatomy of a person for hours, drawing every little curve to making it realistic. I wanted to stop watching. I wanted to turn off and abandon that TV and the DVD inside, but I had already gone too far. I had to see this through to the end. It would haunt me for the rest of my life if I had stopped there. After taking a short breather and drinking some water, I pressed the play button on the remote to resume the madness. Instantly, I was greeted by a slurp sound of Japan sliding his hand into Italy's body and beginning to pull out the organ. It looked like the liver. With it so detailed, it was hard to not mistake the organ. Japan sighed as he cut the connection strand with his sword and set a mess of organs to the other discarded jacket before going back and setting aside a kidney. Both of them. While Japan searched around, Germany reached over with some sharpened sticks as he pulled and gathered earlier and penetrated the sharp end with each organ that Japan had let out. With a saddened sigh, he set the organ kebabs on a range of the fire so it could get cooked, which I didn't know that was even possible. Once more, after a seemingly long period of time, Germany pulled the now-cooked liver out of the fire while handing it to Japan, who accepted it with his arms still blood-smeared, a kidney. Both of them was silenced before Japan murdered Ikadakimasu, and both took a large bite from it. Ugh, it still makes me feel weird when I think about seeing this scene, but that lightheadedness faded as I heard something that made me gasp. Doisu? Nihon? Both turned back in shock. The camera panning over to show that Italy was awake. What? How was he awake? They drowned him! How is he still conscious? Hell, I wasn't even sure what was going on, and it seemed like the other two had no idea either. Germany and Japan tried to explain themselves, but Italy began to grow more panicked, slowly getting what was happening and began to scream in pain. Fear and sadness. I couldn't even pinpoint what emotion was there, but it was still weird to hear him like that. It almost sounded like the man voicing him was in a large amount of pain himself. Germany and Japan went over to him, trying to get him to be quiet. Though, after large confusion of everyone yelling at once, Germany was the one to finally scream for everyone to be quiet, shaking Italy to try to make him quiet, resulting to just tugging the curl and making him stop momentarily. At this point, when I should have laughed, I was practically at the point of tears. Germany talked, trying to appear strong and try to explain the situation. My guess was the situation was they have no food left, so they were going to eat Italy since he was the weakest. Though, he was a nation, right? They were all nations. Why did they have to resort to that? Was that why Italy woke up? Germany confronted Italy while being harvested. Screenshot taken by Fia. Soon enough, Italy gave an understanding nod, whimpering in pain and fear as well. He spluttered out something, pausing at the moment to cough, blood drooling down his chin. Now it was Japan's turn to talk. Seemingly tried to confront him in a soothing tone. After his small speech, Italy nodded once more before looking down, seeing that Germany was gripping his hand tightly. With another nod from the German and Japanese nation, Japan went back over to scoop his hand to now somewhat functioning body, pulling and cutting out his spleen and setting it aside. Italy almost screamed, reducing to a sort of mixture of whimpering and sobbing. The camera cut to a view of him and Germany's hand becoming more constricted against each other. The shot panned up from the frowning Germany, who was glancing to Japan's work before speaking again, calling Italy's attention. He spoke for a bit, trying to smile, and soon Italy smiled back at him. For once, the series actually opened his eyes to reveal their golden honey color, called the familiar word he used to call him, Captain. There was a time skip, and soon a large portion of organs was lying on Italy's jacket. Things I could recognize being intestines, pancreas, bladder, practically everything but the brain, lungs, and heart. Japan wiped an arm to his forehead, smearing the blood accidentally before impaling them to a stick and sticking near the fire. He turned to Germany, who was still holding Italy's hand. He crawled over to get a closer look, and Italy had seemed to pass on again, his eyes slightly glistening and staring blankly upwards with a small smile on his face. Italy smiling even in death. This shot was the very one showed in the menu. Japan looked up to Germany, seeing that he was frowning, blue eyes glistening with tears as he tried to get over having this happen to him. Japan set a hand on his shoulder, murmuring something seemingly comforting, making Germany nod in agreement and sigh shakingly. Japan frowned slightly at the moment he moved aside, grabbing his dead Italian free hand and squeezing it slightly, saying something to Germany before looking to the fire which the organs were roasting on. Germany glazed back to the fire for a moment before looking up to the sky where Italy was staring. The camera panned upward toward it, past the stars and everything until it was completely black. And then the next episode started playing. Just like that, no credits or anything. Just left the episode on a cryptic or optimistic note. I had no idea. I wish I could have it on my computer and get screenshots, but the disc refused to play on here for some reason, and I don't really have a good camera to snap a clear shot. My friend Fia was kind enough to get 2 screenshots for me. Through the disc only worked on her computer for so long, but I'd rather not look at it again. It may not sound as bad as you read this, but it made me get away from Hetalia for a while, honestly. Though I'm not as weak-stomached as my sister, I still love the series and I will continue to love it. But since then, I refuse to watch any anime episodes. I would prefer to see fan-made gore over official ones of any time.